Hey there. Today, I'm going to take you on a journey through history, and we're going to talk about something a little bit interesting. At least I feel it's interesting. We're going to talk about the invisible city. Now, if you already know what that is, that's fine. But if you don't, if you were like I was a couple of years ago, then you'll think, invisible city? Huh? Is it the 1972 Italian novel we're talking about? Is it the 99% Invisible City, the book? No, the Invisible City, and honestly, I don't know where the concept came from because I haven't been able to find that. I heard it first time from a cybersecurity researcher named Eleanor Saita. And when she presented it, she talked about it like this. So let's start with these guys. We were all like them at some point. Well, not exactly like them, but we were pretty much there if we go back far enough. Now, you'll notice on the picture that there are two of them because these guys, just like us, long, long ago, they didn't live alone if they could help it. They lived in groups. They lived in packs. And belonging to a pack, well, there were things you needed to do, things you needed to respect, ways you needed to behave, and you couldn't stick out too much. You couldn't be too individualistic because you needed to adhere to the rules of the pack. Fast forward a little bit, and we as humans started doing this. Not building this exact nice walkway in the woods, but taming nature, taking control of our environment. At some point that led to this, the formation of tribes, of us no longer living in small packs, but in bigger groups. Now in a tribe, suddenly you're not as close as you were in the pack, but you're still pretty close. You still probably know most people, and you behave. If you're the leader, you lead. If you're a follower, you follow. If you're the guy who cleans up the dung, you clean up the dung. Now, if you had some weird interest, I don't know what counted as a weird interest in ancient times, but there were probably plenty of them. The ancient version of liking Batman movies, or being a cosplay fan, or having a fascination with stamps. People had hobbies, people had interests, but they weren't really... There wasn't a lot of time for it. There wasn't a lot of options compared to what we have. But also, the chances of somebody else sharing your passion, if it was strange, pretty small. And the chances of you kind of getting to do anything about it, even smaller. Because in the tribe, again, you needed to be like you were supposed to be. And if you were strange, well, then you needed to kind of just suck it up and get on with it. On the plus side, trust was high. Everybody knew everybody. And there was a good chance that, well, you were part of your tribe. So finding your micro tribe might have been something that you wanted to do to pursue your strange interests, but you at least had plenty of stuff in common with the other tribe members. Loneliness, not that big a thing. Now let's advance a little bit. This is a village. We've now jumped a little bit ahead in history. And some people were still in tribes at this point. But villages, the village was bigger. Suddenly you don't know everyone as well. You maybe know of them, but you don't know them personally in the same way as with the smaller tribe. Specialization, however, happens. Suddenly there's a guy who's just the blacksmith. I mean, he shoes stuff. He works with iron, with metal. That's what he does. Suddenly there are people who can do things that were simply not possible in tribal society because surplus food, surplus organization, all this sort of stuff leads to the possibility of specialization. And suddenly, in a village of, let's just call it a couple of hundred, you might not be the only one that has this weird interest that you do. You might be able to find that other person or those other people, band together and have a club or have a meeting once in a while, or kind of just have a small community, a tribe within the tribe, so to speak. On the minus side, in the village, yes, you'll have your family unit. Yes, you'll have people you're connected to, but it's not as close as the tribe. And there's a higher chance that you're going to feel left out and you're going to feel disconnected. Now, this is the town I grew up in. This is Roskilde in Denmark. And what you see there is the UNESCO Heritage Monument Roskilde Cathedral. Very, very nice place. We've done events there for many years. Beautiful, beautiful. If you're in Roskilde, go see it. Roskilde is a town of about 50,000 people. It's a completely different thing than a small village. My mother grew up in the small village of Gunsemale. And Gunsemale is outside Roskilde, about 20 kilometers, and it's about, I think, roughly 4,000 people. Now, Roskilde, where I grew up, was 50,000 people. Very big difference. More specialization, more options for having different kind of interests and finding your micro tribes, more chances to find people who think like you, even if you're not like the people closest to you. For me, it meant a role-playing club. And not only did Roskilde have one, it had several role-playing clubs. And I got to be part of one, and it was a major factor in my life. Now, if I'd lived in a city like my mother did, the village, not the city, then that probably wouldn't have been at the same level unless it had been unusual. So the bigger the city is, in this here we're talking like a town or a small city, the bigger the chances of you finding kindred spirits. But loneliness is also a bigger thing. You maybe know your neighbors on the street you live, but that's about it. Where in the village you'd know more people, here you'd know less. You would have better options of connecting, of finding people who are like you, of finding that strange someone or those strange some people or that club you could belong to, those with like-minded interests. But there's also a better chance that you're going to be lonely. Now, this is Copenhagen, where I spent most of my adult years living. In Copenhagen, we're talking about a city 600,000 by one count, 1.6 if you count all the suburbs, that sort of thing. It's a completely different beast than Roskilde. Here, many people live, most people actually, especially in the inner city, live in apartments. You might not even know your neighbor. It's a completely different life from if we go back and look at the tribes. On the other hand, those special interests, those specializations, well, just to use role-playing as an example, there was not just one role-playing club in Copenhagen. There were quite a few of them. They had their own mini community, their own society within society within society. Because the bigger the city is, the bigger the urban sprawl, the more it's possible to find people who are like you, no matter what you're into. Now, let's take it one step further and look at the megacities. Shanghai, New York. I'm not even sure where this picture is from, and I should know. But there are cities out there that are big, that have 10 million, that have 20 million. I've been to Tokyo. According to some calculations, Tokyo is 38 million people. It's crazy. It's insane. It's unfathomable. But it also means you can find anything and everything there if you know where to look. Loneliness? Yeah. It's a thing, it's real, and it's worse. What it does mean is that the bigger the city, the more specialization is there, the more these tribes within tribes are there, the more you can find whatever your heart's desire might be, no matter how weird or special it is. But it also means that the physical constraints are different. If you walked into a village like my mother's hometown of Gunsemale, then you can walk from one end of that to the other end pretty fast. If you went to Roskilde, where I grew up, it would take you quite a bit longer. It would take you, I don't know, 2 hours maybe to walk from one end to the other, but you could still do it fairly quickly. Copenhagen, walking from one end to the other, that's a challenge. And go to some place like New York. You can start here, and you can keep walking for a long time. Finding stuff. If you go to a small tribal encampment with 100 people, it's pretty easy to find things. It's pretty easy to find people. You walk around, you ask, maybe you just kind of wander around until you stumble into what it is. Or a city like Shanghai, you can walk around for days without finding what you're looking for. So with me so far, the progression of cities and urban sprawls has meant a lot of good stuff, also some bad stuff, and some changing ways of living together. It means that what we did, not me personally, but what we did back when we were tribes, back when we all lived in small villages, was different from how you live in Mumbai, from how you live in Mexico City. One of the things is that if you live in a very small village and you see somebody who's homeless, you're probably going to talk to them or invite them inside or help them because you're probably going to know them. Where in a big city, Los Angeles, I saw some statistic at the time, had something like 57,000 homeless people. It means that if you live in Los Angeles and you are not able to shut out the homelessness, to shut out the poverty, then you're going to be spending your days on nothing else. And you're probably not going to be able to live your life. I'm not saying you shouldn't help homeless people. Of course you should. But I'm saying is that some of the things that you need, some of the mechanisms that you take for granted in a small place are completely different in a large place. And vice versa. If I live in a small village of 100 people, it's natural to go over and say hi to somebody I don't know. Where if I do that every time I meet somebody I don't know, if I'm in Dubai, it's going to be a pretty weird feeling. And they're going to look at me like what's wrong with you? So, from tribes, from monkeys, or apes, if we're being proper about it, to megapolises, megapolis, the huge cities, the megacities of today. Let's talk about the invisible city. The invisible city is the internet. And the internet is at once the biggest city out there and the smallest. It's a place where everyone is, but where you don't necessarily know how to find anyone. It's far. The internet makes everything incredibly far away because you're not going to find it until you get the right guide. On the other hand, if you know where to go, at the click of a button, click, click, you're there. What does that mean for how we live? It means a lot of things. It means that suddenly we are living in the greatest, biggest city ever built. But in the internet, on the internet, loneliness, oh, that's possible. You can be lonely on the internet. Finding stuff, if you don't know where to look, you can spend your whole life without finding it. If you go to Shanghai and you methodically start searching for a certain shop, at some point, it may take you years, but at some point you're going to find that shop. The internet could search your whole life. If you don't know where you're going, you're not going to find it. On the other hand, if you do know where you're going, things are right there whenever you need them, wherever you need them. Now, this is tricky because how does that mean we act as people? On one hand, everybody's close, everybody's connected, everybody's there. At the click of a button, we are next to strangers. On the other hand, we don't really know how to deal with them. We're just learning as humans how to deal with having cell phones, how to deal with having the ability to call each other, to connect, to move fast. We don't really know how to kind of live with this technology that we've created. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's good. Personally, I find the internet a wondrous and fascinating place. I know others disagree. But one thing is for certain, we haven't learned how to live with it. And if we look back at technology, there's some lovely stories of when TVs first came around, like when they started to get into homes. Some people would dress up in their finest clothes to watch TV because what if the people were looking back at them? Even though, of course, salespeople would say they're not looking back at you. But still, when cell phones came around, I remember when cell phones started to become a thing. I wasn't that old, but I was alive. And I remember conversations where people said, but now I have to be available all the time. And then somebody else said, well, you can just not answer. Like, what? Not answer? But I have the ability. How can I not answer? Isn't that rude? And suddenly social norms had to be reconfigured. Because before, if you walked up to somebody's door and rang their doorbell and they didn't answer and they were home and you could see them, that would be considered pretty rude. At least they would come out and say, no, not right now. But what when we got a phone? Just a standard landline phone. That changed the dynamic. And cell phones, that changed everything. Instant communication, instant travel within this huge city, within the invisible city is a thing. But it also means we need to learn when to not pick up, when to not be available. We need to learn how to actually live as human beings in the invisible city. You get it, right? You get this. It's one thing, it's the other. It's far, it's close, it's big, it's small, all that sort of thing. You get that. But what am I saying with it? What does it have to do with innovation? And what does it have to do with you? Well, first off, I have a boon for you. It's not a request, it's just a wish. Go easy on people. Remember, they're learning. Every day when they wake up, they're trying to navigate in chaos and in a situation that nobody's been in before. And then the next day they have to do it again. Give people some slack. Forgive them. Say, okay, they're trying. Realize that change is going faster than we can absorb. And that means that we're trying our very best. It's not always... Oh. Just a cough, not corona. We're trying. And we're failing. But the more we allow people to try, the more we allow them to fail, the more we're forgiving, the more we're accepting, the more we go easy on people, the nicer it is, both for them and for us. And what that has to do with innovation? Well, we're still these guys. We may have gotten a bit better dressed, or at least differently dressed. We may have gotten a few nicer tools, but we're still these guys. Evolutionary speaking, we're still these guys. So when you're designing, when you're creating, when you're communicating, remember that inside all of us, there's still the apes. There's still that tribal beast that evolved over so many years. And then within a snap of a historical finger, we've started doing things completely differently. And now we live in a place that's contradictory by its very existence. That's a lot to take in when you look like this guy. When you look like this guy. So, the invisible city. If you didn't know about it beforehand, now you do. If you did know about it and you thought, what does it have to do with innovation? Everything. Because it pervades everything in our life. And no matter what you're doing, what you're looking at, you're going to have to deal with the fact that the invisible city and our place in it is something that shapes how we as humans live, how we work, how we are, and it also shapes innovation, even if we try to ignore it. So with that, thank you.